Stocks handed in their worst week since May. The Nasdaq falling 0.75% today as we head into a very big week for tech earnings. Facebook, Amazon, Alphabet, chip giant Intel all reporting next week. So we thought this would be the perfect opportunity to play a little game of
Trade it or fade it.
That's right. Trade it or fade it for a Friday. And we kick it off here with Facebook up more than 50% on the year heading into the report. So are you trading it or fading it? Guy Adami.
So now, given everything I've just said for the last 3 minutes, you would have said to yourself, Guy's got to fade Facebook,
Guy's
right?
going to fade everything, it sounded like.
And no, I'm going to trade Facebook. And I've said it for a while. I want to hate Facebook for a number of different reasons on a number of different levels. And hopefully one day that'll be the case. But you know what? It sets up really well into earnings. They've had everything's thrown against them over the last couple of months. The stock continues to go higher. The last earnings quarter was ridiculously strong. I think this earnings release will be as well, and I think we make a push towards all-time highs.
Grasso.
I agree. This is sort of like the oil thing. You couldn't have scripted a more negative thing for the opposite. You couldn't have scripted a more negative thing for or headwinds for Facebook, but it continues to gain market share with ad revenues. Google continues to lose. Even if it's incremental, I would say trade it.
What'll be key for you, Karen, as a shareholder? So obviously you're trading it because you're a shareholder.
I'm a shareholder, right? So I would trade it. I agree with everything Guy said. I think that last quarter was phenomenal. I think that we're going to see another very big top line. I think the question will be what are the margins, right? How much are they having to spend? I think getting clarity on anything like the FTC penalty, whatever that may be, I think is a good thing for them, like we saw with Boeing yesterday, having some sense of clarity. So I am long, not that I'm not nervous, I am, but I am long, and I think Marcus was definitely in the crosshairs. That's over for now.
Yeah, and margins is part of this, but it was always the operating expenses. When they came out with a bigger operating expense, that sunk the stock in the after-hour session.
Here's the thing. I just look at Microsoft today. It had a great quarter last night, okay? The stock opened on the highs, made a new all-time high, and it closed on the lows. And I think that if you go back and you look at late April when we got Q1 earnings, we saw a lot of price action like this in every single one of these names. Amazon, Facebook, Alphabet, they all rallied into their earnings, and they all saw 7 to 10% declines over the next month. Now, that corresponded with a broad market sell-off in May, but who knows what the tail was wagging the dog here, because we know what MAGA is. We know that it's massive, and, the MAGA complex.
Yeah.
And the M is not for MAGA,
well, I know,
it's for Microsoft.
Look.
There you go. But to my point, I mean, listen, I think Google's got their own specific issues. If they have 2 consecutive disappointing results, that stock's going back down towards 1050. Amazon is back up to those prior highs. Facebook, to me, I just think that this one has done its job. It's basically, I don't disagree on that FTC thing. I think that I do disagree. That's one deal. The thing that they launched in June, in early June, that's a totally separate situation here. So I think those headlines are they're gonna trouble Facebook and Google for the rest of the
Does that mean, you have to ask him, Mel, because does that mean he never said it? Thank you.
What do you think?
No, I know what I think. But
Sounds like he faded Google, too.
Some people might have the sound down. They don't know.
Let's see what Dan has to say about Amazon, also surging into earnings up more than 30% ahead of the report Thursday. So what do you say?
I just don't think there's any upside. Again, let's just go back to what I just said. Buy Microsoft at an all-time high. Buy Amazon at an all-time high after they put up a good number. But here's the thing. I think the risk reward is 1 up, 2 down. So if they get things wrong, you end up having yourself a situation like Netflix earlier in the week.
You know how Jim Cramer has a buy.
Buy.
We need a fade for Dan. Fade.
Can we make that
So
happen?
here's one thing I want to be really clear. Some of you guys have been around me for a long time,
Yes.
okay? I don't mind fading on spikes like this.
Sure.
I don't press things when they get down to levels, okay? So when Google is down at 1050, I'm not saying sell it because it's going to break or anything like that. So to me, I think you fade moves like this, especially in events after you've had big runs.
Why are you raising your hand?
Because to back that up, to illustrate a point, to give you anecdotal and real evidence about exactly what he just said, I recall recently when that electric car company, the Tesla, was pushing down towards 170. Dan specifically said, you know what, it feels to me as if all the news is in, people getting way too negative. Look at that sucker now.
That was right.
He was spot on.
Right.
Well, stay tuned for OA with me and Karen. We're going to talk a little Tesla.
That's quite a tease.
Nice.
Alphabet here well off the highs for the year. Chairwoman, traded or faded?
I'm long. So this one I am the most nervous about because that last quarter, unlike Facebook, that last quarter for Google was really problematic. And I don't know if Dan alluded to is Facebook taking share. I think the pie is growing big enough that Facebook can do, first of all, they need to do a much better job on the call than they did. Again, I would love to see them do something with the ridiculous balance sheet. But I like that it is nowhere near the highs going into the earnings. Nowhere near. Right? So I'm glad that it actually pulled back today. I'm long, but I am nervous. Another bad quarter will not be
What
good
you
for
would
them.
like them to do is to return capital to shareholders or buy back stock.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Want to eat a special dividend if they don't want to get locked into being a dividend payer. Or one
I don't like that
special
it's performed so poorly going into the earnings print. So I would be a
Really?
fader of it for everything I just said about Facebook. They've been gaining market share in the ad revenue. Google has been losing it, even if it's incremental. And they also have macro headwinds to worry about. Them being Google.
I understand what they're both saying, and I want to trade it because it makes sense on valuation. It makes sense because it's 1,300 was a recent high, and now here we are at 1131, and everything sort of lines up. But it just doesn't feel right. It doesn't feel right. So for those reasons, fade
Got to
it.
go with your feelings, Guy.
You got to trust your instincts.
Last one, Intel. Grasso, what do you say?
Well, Intel, you want to talk about who's been eating Intel's lunch? AMD has been eating Intel's lunch. When we look at the Xbox.
Self would you rather right there at the end.
love
on
it.
Friday.
Just did.
A game within a game.
I think that's going to continue. That's the trend that we've been seeing. You're seeing Microsoft spatting with Intel. They're replacing Intel chips, potentially rumored replacing Intel chips with AMD chips. AMD is having a stellar year, not overbought. I'd stay with AMD over Intel. I'd fade Intel.
Dan?
Yeah, I would just listen. I'm also fading Intel, but not aggressively here. I think if you see this stock back in the mid to high 40s, I think you buy it. I know there were some very high-profile delays of some chips. AMD caught some market share. I saw their CEO Bob Swan earlier in the week in Fortune's conference this week. He sounded pretty optimistic about all those things we spent a lot of time talking about: Internet of Things, autonomy, and all these acquisitions they've made. So I think that they're thinking about a much better second half of the year. And then you got to go back to Taiwan Semi and what they said. They called the bottom. Intel's probably a quarter or so behind that.